All of these elements were done so well that, to be honest, I don't think this type of game has been replicated since.
Are you sure about that?
G'day guys, this is Moldy Fish Dick, and it's kind of ironic that I made a War of the Monsters video with no idea that a War of the Monsters like game was about to release on Steam under 2 weeks from then. And when I clicked on GigaBash, that's the kind of nostalgic feeling I had when I first saw it, and even when I played it. So if you're unfamiliar with these types of games, this is pretty much an arena brawl with giants and a destructible environment. It definitely reactivated my childhood wires, and I had a blast, no bullshit. I had a lot of fun with this, and the story mode was great. However, this doesn't mean it's perfect, or worth the money for everyone in that case. I personally think this was worth the money, just being over half price of a AAA game, because there was a lot of effort put into this. It was visually spectacular, and you know how often I go on about map designs, but when I say they're good, I mean it. And there's heaps of maps that I haven't even unlocked yet, even after finishing the main story. And the designs for the Titan were so distinct to this game as well, and its aesthetic. And although similar Titans or giants have been designed in the past, they did feel uniquely their own. But without further ado, let's get right the fuck into this review. So there are 3 main modes you can play. There's couch play, where you can play with someone else in the same house, online where you can play with someone else in a different house, and then story. Couch play and online also have this mayhem mode, which has a bunch of unique mini modes to play, and my favourite of these mini modes are rampage, where you have to destroy as many buildings as possible while fighting against another player, and the player with the highest score, or whoever knocks over the most fucking buildings, wins. There's also a sudden death mode, where a single attack will defeat whoever you're up against, and you only have 3 lives, so pretty much 3 hits, 3 lives. And there's another one where you're on a frozen lake and the lake starts to break the longer you're standing on it. The last person standing, or whoever tosses the other player into the lake, is the winner. There are a few others, but I feel like these are the strongest the minigames has to offer. However, the biggest mode is online mode, which has 1v1, 2v2, and free-for-all. Now unfortunately, this is kind of a niche game at the moment, and I haven't been able to match with anyone all morning pretty much. Hopefully the longer this game is out, the more people hop online, but as of now, it's pretty fucking hard to find any online matches, which is a big bummer. But I won't knock the game on that. Obviously, this isn't an issue with the game, as it's more up to the community, but I can't have much of a take on online play, or any fucking take at all actually. But the main part of this review that I'll focus on is primarily the story mode and gameplay. I honestly thought the story was going to be very short, and all of them were going to repeat through the same story with different characters like in War of the Monsters, but I was surprised to see that each one was unique and they had a completely different journey. And I obviously won't spoil any plot details, but I'll just give my experience with the game and some plot details that aren't, you know, spoiling the essence of this game. Gorogong, Pippi-Durus, Wooly, and Thundertross are the 4 main characters that have their own adventures to follow. Thundertross is spelt differently than probably can't say it on here because I'll get demonetized. Each one provides different motivations, side characters, and maps or areas to explore. And within each level, there's many objectives that you can complete as well, such as hit this guy with a fucking thing 3 times, or knock him in, fucking electrify, I don't know. When I played through as Gorogong, which is the first person you play through as, I just had the difficulty on normal, but I found it too easy, then swapped to hard, which is called Apex. Now, here's where my first complaint comes in. I played through the 3 characters following Goro Gong on Apex difficulty, and I need to say the difficulty spikes and dips are crazy, my G. I played through with Pippi Duras and I thought there were no glaring issues, but there were some crazy spikes when I went on to play as Wooly. I would have died around 50 times, no joke, on around 2 or 3 different levels. But when I went to Thundertross, I didn't die one fucking time. I actually had to go back and check my difficulty setting in case I put it on easy, because it was legitimately a walk in the park to do. But apart from that issue, the gameplay itself wasn't clunky. I actually really enjoyed it, and it did feel like a fighting game with a smooth block and dodge, and it was relatively easy to get the hang of. And each character had different moves that did completely different things, which is always great to see in a fighting game. In terms of story, I feel like Thundertross, spelt differently yet again, completely stole the show for me. The first 3 were pretty good, but Thundertross definitely had a stronger backstory and even involved other characters to actually be a big part of the story as well. And since he was the last character, if it weren't for this strong finish, I wouldn't have appreciated this game as much as I do. So the story closed spectacularly in my eyes. Now let's get into the gameplay side of things a bit more. When I'm comparing this game to War of the Monsters, its score for me does take a pretty big hit. Yet again, War of the Monsters, a game that released almost 2 whole decades ago, is still currently more fun than this game. And it's simply the feeling of being a massive monster in a destructible environment. GigaBash sometimes feels like you're just average sized in a really small destructible environment. Like I've just set up Lego sets around me and I'm knocking them over. When you get thrown across the map into a building in War of the Monsters, it feels slow and impactful. You glide through the air and knock a building and see it crumble slowly as if you were massive and the buildings were massive. Whereas in GigaBash, it falls way too quick, and it just seems like there's no structure to the buildings. I mean, there's no fucking structure to these buildings. You can just pick it up like a fucking parcel from the mailman. You can't do this. You can't pick up a building from the ground like that. They're supposed to have foundation. They're supposed to have foundation in the buildings. And also, yes, the map designs are great and it has a really good aesthetic, like I said, but some arenas and most of the arenas are way too small. In short, War of the Monsters truly feels like you've entered a massive city, terrorizing everyone around you, even accidentally or deliberately, stepping on everyone, creating blood splatters along your path and slowly destroying the whole city as you fight. You can simply do it way too quick in GigaBash because it feels like you've entered a Lego city. And I understand they're trying to appeal more to kids, but still, the feeling of being giant is still better in War of the Monsters, and that's what I wanted to feel from this game. I'm sorry guys, that's why I came here. That's why I'm here. War of the Monsters still hasn't been topped, my G. 20 years later, still the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, that's what you get when you have the same developers that later went on to work with God of War, but still, I have to be open and honest about this. And I do feel like the final boss, Zivatron, was kind of meh. Was kind of a meh boss. Looked kind of cool, but also looked like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. Cerebulon was definitely a better final boss fight. Like, there was a bigger build-up to him, and better cutscenes as well, whereas Zyva lost its charm. I wish there was more mystery surrounding Zyva before the fight, and you didn't have to fight him like 4 different times on 4 different timelines, it feels like, because this boss just felt overdone at the end to an extent. However, in saying that, I do think the story was maybe a bit better. Now, in no way was the backstories of each monster better than the War of the Monsters, but the adventure was, especially with Thundertross and Wooly even. The actual adventure itself was better than War of the Monsters. I feel like I'm saying War of the Monsters over and over again, but come on, if you've played it, you know why I'm comparing this game to it so much and using this as a benchmark. They're very, very similar. Another thing I need to mention as well, when I bumped up the difficulty, it wasn't that I was just dealing less damage and taking more damage. The AI got smarter. Something that I'd compare the artificial intelligence in this game to is, maybe, I don't know, Stan Lee's fucking superhumans? What the fuck? It didn't matter what I did, it felt as if they were predicting my movements. The millisecond I was about to block, they grabbed me. When I spammed cheese moves, they joined in too and they started cheesing the fuck out of their super moves. They were on my ass, fam. Sometimes I was like, are the devs secretly disguising themselves right now? Because it truly feels like I was fighting a person. But at the same time, well, most of the time, it seemed fair. But something that upset me is that there weren't really any big boss fights in general. Like, each level played out the same, just fight 1 or 2 people and that's it. Whereas with the game I'm comparing it to, there are a few fighting levels leading up to big boss fights where you had to do other things than just punch and block. And the bosses behaved completely differently to the previous enemies. For example, in Outpost X, the giant robot boss in War of the Monsters stayed up on top of a building you couldn't get to during its first phase. He threw time bombs that you had to throw back at him, and when you weakened him enough, he'd come down and fight you, but he had one move where he'd use his propellers to swing wildly and ram you. And you had to get on top of these 3 pillars, because if you were on the ground, it's pretty much night-night, motherfucker. But the 3 pillars that you used for safety were slowly getting chipped away. You were forced to find windows in the boss's attack patterns before all 3 pillars were gone, and nothing could protect you from this attack if these were gone. The bosses following this all had different things like this, with unique arenas that complemented them. There wasn't anything like this in GigaBash. Absolutely no unique boss fights. Granted, there was one where you had to hide behind some pillars to protect yourself from a beam, but this was just present with the map itself, even on co-op or online. It wasn't even a thing to do with the boss. Now, I know it sounds like I've said a lot of negative things about this game, but it's just because I'm still comparing similar games to a game that came out 19 years ago. Like, goddamn, how many times do I need to bring this up? But this game still is fun. The destructibility, although it feels like Lego or something, is still fun, and the nostalgia is still there. The explosives are fun to use, and the visuals are fucking great. I do like the aesthetic, and another thing I often forget to compliment is the soundtrack in games. Something I definitely should have mentioned in my Stray review, but this soundtrack was banging, my dude. The vibes were good, and the story mode was definitely a great takeaway from this experience. Hopefully I'm able to hop into online soon when more people give it a go, because I truly do believe you should give this a go if you like these types of games. But for now, my final verdict is a 6.5 out of 10. 5, remember, being average, this is still an above average game. However, more could be improved, and hopefully there's some more content that gets added into the game, hopefully for free, as it's a very short game with not a lot of content to justify the price tag. But I'd love to see more story modes that explore other characters, and maybe throw in some bigger maps too. But that'll be it for this video. If you liked it, please give this video a like and consider subscribing if you want to, as I'm still very new to creating content, and gathering an audience for my videos is pretty hard. But if you made it to the end of this video, thanks heaps, and I hope you have a great day. As always, stay safe, stay sexy, stay humble. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Suck your nipple.